afternoon. I'm Barbara Tinnerman-Cecil, and on behalf of Susie Spittler and Scott Bloom, who came to our rescue at the last minute, I want to welcome you to the 34th oral history taping. It is Tuesday, November 10th, 2015, and today we have members of the class of 1960 and 1961 who are going to talk about the 1950s. Our first speaker is Judy Kuhl-Leckleider. Judy.
Thank you. Thank you, Barb. I'm Judy Kuhl-Leckleider, and I graduated in 1961, and I'm pleased to present some facts about Kuhl's Dairy Bar that my father started approximately 1951. I used to work for Inland Manufacturing, General Motors in Dayton, and made guns for the war. And he was always giving ideas to the line about things for improvement. And the guys at Inland suggested that he should really be in business for himself. And so he came home and talked to Mama Kuhl about it. She wasn't very happy. She decided that she needed a weekly check. And she didn't think she'd have that. He went in business for himself. But we went to visit. Once a month we'd go over and see great Uncle Frank Bowman in Richmond, Indiana. And he was from my mother's side of the family. And he had the restaurant in Richmond. And so he came to visit us one time. And we came to West Milton, and my dad said he wanted to do something, start a business. So Uncle Frank picked out the spot right across the street from here, which is now the Subway House. But that was Kuhl's Dairy Bar. And so he built the dairy bar, quit Inland Manufacturing, and we went to work for ourselves. And it turned out to be a really nice business. I got to grow up in it. It was fun. I got to sleep in over the walk-in cooler while we were going to school. I had some pads up there, blankets, and about 9 o'clock, that's where I went to sleep. And then they drug me home to Emmerich Road. And I went to bed, and I got up and got on the school bus and came back to West Milton the next morning. So that was the beginning of Kuhl's Restaurant. Our family lived out on the farm for quite a while, probably 5 or 6 years. And then we sold it and came to West Milton and built a house back here behind the dairy bar. And we had a lot of great memories in our home, in our restaurant. This is, Sharon, would you stand up? This is my mother's apron that I kept, that she wore in the dairy bar. She had one for every day of the week. This was one of her Christmas aprons. I think these are the only 2 things I have left of that era, but it was quite fun. We had the dairy bar for probably 5 or 6 years, and my brother got hurt. And when that happened, it just sort of took the wind out of the sails of Mom and Dad. So they leased the property to a couple of folks. I think Wagner, that used to own the restaurant downtown in West Milton, he came and he ran it for a while, particularly when my brother was hurt. And then after that, I think we leased it to a guy by the name of Jim Harris. And he had it for a few years, and then another fellow came along and he bought it. So that was sort of the end of the Kuhl's Dairy Bar. It did go through a transition at one point and became Jack's Chuck Wagon. And when I was in 7th and 8th grade, my job was to take care of all the flowers that were underneath the big sign that was at the end of the road. So that was kind of fun. Then with the Kuhl's Dairy Bar, I remember we had 50-cent burgers, or maybe they were less than that, because it was like 35 cents when you had cheese. 25-cent French fries and whipping chips, lots of malts and milkshakes. We had car hops, and I remember we had a drive-through that went through the side. And I remember my job was to stop the cigarette machine that was out there. That was a chore, but that was kind of fun. And during that time period, I think I was dating, and we got to go see Elvis Presley at the Hobart Arena. And that was really fun. And small world as it is, I'm married down to Dennis Lechleiter, and his brother Jack Lechleiter was in the Army with Elvis Presley in Germany in 1958 and 59. So it was kind of fun. He had lots of pictures to show me of what they took in the Army, and it was a lot of fun to see those back in those days. So I'll turn this over now to Judy Batson-Butts, and she's going to talk about her experience.
I'm Judy Batson-Butts, and I grew up in the 50s out in the country, and my experiences were a little different than some of my classmates who grew up in town. I'm part of a large family. I had 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and of course my parents. I was next to the oldest, so I changed lots of diapers and took care of lots of little ones over the years. We lived on Dorsey Rice Farm out on Kessler Road, which is just north of Turkey Foot, out in the country. We were the second house on a property. The landlord, the landowner lived in the big house. Our house consisted of 3 bedrooms, a living room, and a kitchen. There was no running water, but we had a small pitcher pump in the kitchen that we would pump up and down to get that water out. We had no furnace. Our heat was just a coal stove. We had to keep it stoked up to keep it warm in the house. And usually it stayed pretty good during the day, but once in a while at night it would go out and it would be a little chilly. Only the bottom floor would be heated. We were way ahead of our time, as we were part of the tiny house nation back then, but our tiny house was a 2-hole outhouse out back. And Grandma had the deluxe one. She had the 3-holer with a small hole in the center, which was great because you didn't feel like you were going to fall through. It was a little drafty in our little tiny house in the wintertime, so you hurried up real fast. We spent a lot of time, our mother didn't work, didn't drive, so she was always a stay-at-home mom. With a large family, we spent a lot of time in the garden, working in the summer, growing all our fruits, or growing all our vegetables. We canned hundreds of quarts of green beans and beets and tomatoes, and made tomato juice, made our own homemade ketchup. It was always a thrill to get to be the one that put the cap on top of the bottle. We had crocks of pickles and brine and cabbage and crocks waiting to make sauerkraut. So we just spent a lot of time preparing all our food. Laundry was an experience too. Since we had no running water, we had a wringer washer. Our water was heated in a copper boiler that sat on top of the stove. It covered 2 burners, and that's how we heat our water to do our laundry. Clothes with the wringer washer, we moved them from the rinse tub to the next rinse tub. When we got done with the wash, we hung everything outside, and it went from tree to tree to the gym set to the fence, wherever we could hang the line to hold all the clothes that we had. When the wash was done, the water from the washer went to clean the tiny house. That was our job, to go scrub the outhouse with the leftover wash water. Tuesday was our day for ironing. We sprinkled clothes with a pop bottle that had a little metal cap on it with holes in it, and we sprinkled those clothes, and we ironed all day long. And we ironed pillowcases and all that back then. No perma-press. Saturday was kind of child labor day at our house, and with a big family, we all learned to pitch in. And that was the day that we all had to clean our rooms, clean the house. We waxed the floors, we washed out the refrigerator every single Saturday. Everyone's expected to do their part. We even had the loin to be a little worn, and the vacuum would show through, but we still waxed that so it would shine real pretty. Bathing was another thing too. The city folks bathed in the bathroom, but we made our own bathroom because that was the day we got the zinc tub out, put it out in the kitchen, you put chairs around it and hung towels over the back, warmed your water on the stove again, filled the tub, and you took a bath. Towels were shared. You didn't each get your own towel. You had to share towels and washcloths. I always volunteered to get the water ready and go first, and for obvious reasons. That was my thing to do. When you were done, after several had bathed, then the water got carried outside and dumped. Mom was our beautician. She cut our hair. She gave us our home perms, and if any of you remember how a Tony or a little home perm smelled,
Yes.
and you had to go to school the next day and ride the bus with your stinky, pinky, curly hair, it wasn't exactly my favorite thing to do. We brushed our teeth with a box of baking soda, and everyone took their toothbrush. We each had our own toothbrush. We didn't have to share those. But we dipped them in the box of baking soda, and that was our toothpaste. Can't imagine how many tubes of toothpaste we went through if we'd used real tubes of toothpaste with that many folks. Mom always cooked, and she was a great cook. We all pitched in and helped with meals. We packed our lunches for school. We had bologna, dry beef, whatever she had. When we ran out of things to put in the bread, we sometimes had butter, brown sugar, and raisins in our sandwich for lunch. And Mom always baked a lot. We had cookies to pack and cookies after school, and Mom was always there at home when we got home from school. We had a Sunbeam bread man that delivered bread to the house for a few years. So Mom didn't make all her own bread. Our landlord milk cows, so we got our milk. He put it in a metal can out in the spring house, and then we go out and get our milk from there. He butchered cows, and so did my grandparents, and we would get beef, and then we always had our freezer full. So very little did we ever buy in the store. When Dad would come from work, he would stop at the store, and it was always just paper goods and things that we couldn't raise or do on the farm. Mom made all our clothes. My grandma had chickens, and back then chicken feed came in a pretty cloth sack, and so all our underwear and pajamas and all that stuff came from chicken feed sacks. As we got older, we all wanted to sew, so we had a little treadle machine. One would stand on one side of the machine and one on the other, and we'd take turns pushing it up and down because our feet wouldn't touch the floor to make the treadle go back and forth. We were thrilled when Dad found an old motor. In the trash one day in town, he picked up trash for Kinnison's Trucking in Tip City, and he put a motor on our sewing machine, so then we really went to town. And we did our 4-H projects on that. We were in 4-H, and we had church activities and youth group at the church. And we did go to band practice. That was the only extracurricular activity because we couldn't, Mom didn't drive, we couldn't get to activities, so band was an evening thing. Vacations, we went on vacations. We went all the way to Miami County Fair. We didn't go anywhere else. So you can picture in your mind, all 11 of us would load up into Dad's 2-door Chevy. And the older ones all held someone. Mom held someone sat in the middle between Mom and Dad. We'd load our lunch in the back of the car, and the lunch would be wrapped in newspaper to keep either meatloaf hot or cold sandwiches cold. Kool-Aid would be in a jug wrapped in newspaper. We didn't have to have a thermal container or anything like that, and it stayed pretty cold. We were always busy, enjoyed our 4-H activities. We learned to embroidery and sew and cook, and we played games at home. That was a big thing, play games, worked on puzzles. We pulled taffy, made homemade popcorn balls. First snow day, we always made homemade donuts, just more home activities. We were always expected to do our best, and if we said we were bored, there was no room for boredom in our family. You got the dust cloth to go and find something to do. We were expected to do our very best in school, and if we got in trouble with a teacher, we were in trouble with our parents at home. We were taught that there were consequences to bad behavior. Christmas gifts and decorations were all homemade. Also, ones made gifts for the children that are younger. We sewed a lot of things, made dolls and that sort of thing. We spent time in front of the TV, watching it warm up, watched the test pattern, adjust the screen so it was all centered, so when the picture came on, it would be in perfect shape. And there was no remote control, and you only had a couple channels to turn that knob to. Our phone was a party line, and you had to wait your turn to use it, and then you also had to be careful what you said because people were listening in when it was your turn to talk. There was no area codes back then, and our phone number, 853M, I still remember that. Our upstairs was unheated, so us older girls would blow a hole in the frost on the inside of the window to see what the weather had done outside at night when we were getting dressed in the morning to go to school. One of the things I remember, and maybe because I became a nurse, was about medicine too. Medicine was different back then. My freshman year I had rheumatic fever, and had to stay home. And Doc Pearson, everyone called him Old Doc Pearson, but Ernest Pearson used to make house calls. And he would come and see me every week and do blood work and whatever he needed. And when Mom would be baking and making cookies or whatever, he'd always see how good it smelled, and she'd give him a sample or send him a cake. And back then there wasn't health insurance, and sometimes we never got billed. He kind of just took care of us. Our own health care at home, Mom treated our illness with gargle with salt water, Vicks or mustard roll on your chest with a hot heated old diaper on your chest to go to bed at night. And if you had the flu, you had tea and toast, and then there was always Mom's X-Lax, so you don't want to complain too much. Those are my memories, mostly of growing up in the 50s. We weren't a rich family, but we were rich, and we were blessed with each other, and we had a lot of fun, and we were well loved. I'm going to turn it over to Myra Foster Hutchinson.
I'm Myra Foster Hutchinson, and I moved to Milton Union Schools in the 3rd grade. I graduated in 1961, lived on a farm west of Ludlow Falls on Route 55. I'm speaking to you about the clothing and hairstyles for guys and gals in the 1950s. One of the clothing styles for the gals was sweaters or blouses with a pencil skirt. The tighter and straighter the better. The side zipper was a closure on most clothes, as it left a smooth front and back on the skirts. Full skirts with 1 or 2 crinoline petticoats were very popular. My mother would take the petticoat, put it in sugar water to make it stiff and full. Once she laid it out in a large circle in the grass to dry. When she checked on it, the petticoat was full of ants. From then on, she dried them over the clotheslines in the basement. Starch was also used to make petticoats stiff. When I sat on the school bus, I took up the whole seat. Full skirts were so fun to wear. Jeans were never worn. The length of skirts and dresses were all below the knee. In the 1950s, the chemise dress was worn and fit like a tube that ballooned out in the middle. So in the 1960s, when I was pregnant, I wore one as a maternity dress. Jumpers and pleated plaid skirts were worn with blouses. When I was 16, my mother had a surprise birthday party, and all of us girls wore baby doll or shorty PJs to sleep in. Teenagers developed their own style with pants. Extra loose pants in the early 1950s, extra slim pants with ballet flats in later years. Long trench coats, wool blazers with an emblem on the front pocket were popular. Lace or mink collars were added on sweaters for a pretty look, and to have a sweater set or a cashmere sweater was very cool looking. It was a fad to put the sweater on backwards and button it up at the back. Sharon Hughes Steele is modeling the poodle skirt, but only a few of my classmates had one, and they were usually homemade. The prom dress was most important dress in the 1950s. High school girls was going to wear. The dress accentuated the waist, and with skirts, the bigger the better. Penny's, Sears, and Montgomery Ward were popular stores to buy or order from. Bobby Brook and White Stage were ladies' clothing manufacturers. Teenage girls would join an organization called the Rainbow Girls. I was the worthy advisor of the West Milton chapter. Only skirts or dresses were the mandated proper attire. During initiations or chapter inspections, all officers wore formals and heels. Made you feel very much like a young lady. And this is the gavel I used to conduct the meeting, and it has the ribbon of the colors of the rainbow on it. Teenagers and housewives wore Spalding shoes, saddle shoes. These were black and white Oxford shoes, most associated with girls in the felt poodle skirts. They were usually worn with a pair of white bobby socks rolled or folded down 3 times. The shoes, soles, and heels were black along with the center panel. White bucks were another style of Oxford shoes for teens. And there's a picture of the saddles in the bucks. The bucks had to be kept perfectly white at all times. Small bunny bags of chalk powder were included with each buck shoe, so girls could powder them when needed. My sisters and I also used baby powder. This style was made popular by popular singer of the time, Pat Boone. The most casual shoes were the Hush Puppy and penny loafers. Penny loafer got its name by the slit in the decorative strap across the tongue. It was sized for a coin. Loafers were worn by girls with sports attire like play suits, shorts, capri pants, and jumper dresses. No stockings or even socks were required. Buster Brown, Bull Parrot, Red Goose were popular kids' shoe stores. The Milton Union Band, which I was a member of, was dressed in red uniforms with white stripes. At home football games, we wore the red jackets with white pants with red stripes. Large red hats with white plumes and white bucks completed the outfit. My junior and senior year, I was also in the Milton Union drill team. Our uniform was a red long-sleeve dress that was very short in length, and in the winter, or the fall, froze. We had white tall boots with red tassels. Co-captains wore all white uniforms. All the girls carried a baton. Homecoming was during football season, and the homecoming court enjoyed wearing furs from Roarks in Laurel, Ohio. Small hats with veils and short gloves were all big in the 1950s. Pearl necklaces, Bulova watches, clip-on earrings were worn. Pop beads, which you could pull apart and make any length that you wanted the necklace or bracelet to be, were popular and fun to play with. Other jewelry worn. This is my mustard seed bracelet, which is so cloudy you can hardly see the mustard seed, and my class ring, and a spoon ring. Those were some other jewelry. Varsity jackets and sweaters with varsity letters sewn on them were worn, and it was exciting to wear your boyfriend's clothes. Dotting perfume on your wrist and behind your ears makes you smell wonderful. The gals would wear their boyfriend's class rings on a chain around their neck, or they would wrap and gore yarn around the ring until it fit their ring finger. And on my boyfriend's ring, I would wrap tape around it, and then I would paint coat after coat of fingernail polish on that tape, and it made it as hard as a rock. My younger sister said she used dental floss. I did not use dental floss. The girls' hairstyles were soft and curly. Straight hair was out, short hair was in. The most celebrated hairstyles were the bouffant, ponytail, pin curls, poodle cut, and beehive styles. Bangs over the forehead were popular. Young women often would tie their hair back in a ponytail and circle it with a pretty chiffon scarf that matched their outfit. There were no curling irons in the 1950s. We had to sleep in curlers or roll our hair with brush rollers and sit underneath a hair dryer to get your hair dry. Perms were also a big thing and were used to permanently curl straight hair. The first thing you notice viewing pictures of guys in the 1950s is the neatness of their dress. The guys' clothing styles were long or short-sleeved button-up shirts with or without sweater vests. Jeans had a place beside slacks, and even t-shirts even made the occasional appearance. But their clothing was always fitted and neat in appearance. Their shirts were tucked in their pants, and a belt was worn. And in the class pictures, the guys wore suits and neckties. Shiny leather loafers completed the look. Some young men, which were called the greaser and rebels, wore black leather jackets with a pack of cigarettes rolled in the sleeve. These jackets and t-shirts were worn with jeans or twirl work pants. The footwear was heavy boots or Converse All-Star sneakers. Teenage guys loved to have their jeans really tight so they could peg the pants legs. When the guys and gals were going steady, the guy would wear his girlfriend's class ring on their small finger or at the end of a finger it would fit. Also, they wore it on a neck chain. The guys' hairstyles were cut short. College executive professional contour are the styles where the boys and men parted their hair on the side, a straight part, and combed it over to one side of their head. Also, the forward combed boogie, crew cut, flat top, butch, and the Hollywood DA with long sideburns were popular styles. Giving this presentation brought back a lot of old memories. Thank you. And now I will present Roy Steele.
Good afternoon. My name is Roy Steele, and I'm here to talk about automobiles of the 50s. You remember the excitement of the new car models were introduced. We would stop by the car dealership showrooms just to see them. It was a big deal back then. Everyone talked cars, discussed the new models, and knew the specifics like horsepower, cubic inch, features, and of course, the cost. Henry Ford put the Americans on wheels, but Detroit in the 50s gave us the style, splendor, and even the pizzazz. No decade in history was better portrayed by the automobile. But some of the car makers threw in the towel. Crosby Motors in 1952, Hudson had been making cars since 1910, merged with Nash Motors in late 1953. It became American Motors Company. Kaiser Frazer phased out Frazer models at the end of '51. Willys Motors in 1953, and Suffolk Marketplace, and moved its operation to Algeria and continued to sell cars. Studebaker was clearly one of the most innovative designs of its time. It merged with Packard in 1954. Packard would all but disappear by 1957. Studebaker survived the decade with the big deals in 1959 and would keep making cars until 1966. They just could not compete with the big three, which was General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler. No new car launch ever got as much publicity as the Edsel did when it was introduced in 1958 by the Ford Motor Company. It had 18 marvelous models choices. Unfortunately, the Edsel was launched into a mild recession, and sales never met Ford's expectations. Edsel was discontinued in November 1959. History, however, will remember the Edsel as a good car at a bad time. The 1950s cars were some of the most classic, powerful, and unsafe cars ever driven. If you ask someone who loves cars what their favorite car is, 8 out of 10 would say a 57 Chevy. By the end of the 50s, Americans fell in love with sports cars. The 50s gave birth to the Corvette and Thunderbird. Now I would like to talk about 1950 Blizzard. My dad had a 49 Jeep, which he drove through in the snow during the blizzard. And the blizzard was 4 days long, November 24th to the 27th. And, excuse me, my mother and I had to pull a sled across town to get groceries. We couldn't, my dad had worked at General Motors and part-time at Wilson Service Station. We went sled riding on old refrigerator tops. The snow was 12 to 14 inches deep. The wind was 40 to 60 miles per hour. The drifts were 20 to 25 feet deep. Some places 57 inches. Ohio State and Michigan played a football game that Saturday, and Michigan won 9-3. And they later on called that the Snow Bowl. Temperatures of 0, and there were 79,000 people that went to the game. And there was 353 people lost their lives during the blizzard. And I'm glad that I grew up in the 50s. I turn it over to Marvin Rue.
Thanks, Roy. I'm Marvin Rue. I'm here to talk about sports at Milton Union during the 1950s. Once a bulldog, always a bulldog. Go Dogs. The many and varied sports and other school activities and clubs make these shout-outs so heartfelt and meaningful to all current students, faculty, and alumni. In the 50s, early 50s, intramural sports were available mainly to the girls, since interscholastic wasn't there yet for the girls, and also the boys who either couldn't or didn't make the school sport teams. And the boys basically were playing basketball as their intramurals. The girls, they had volleyball, basketball, softball, track, bowling. They even tried a few trial sports, field hockey, archery, table tennis. And Nellie Waymeyer, the phys ed teacher for the ladies, headed up most of this intramural stuff. And kudos should be given to Nellie. The GAA, the Girls Athletic Association, came into being to then organize and carry forward on the girls' sports side of things. The girls began interscholastic sports in the middle of the 1950s, and first they were in the Stillwater Valley League, later the SWBL, or the Southwestern Buckeye League. At this point, it's important to recognize how much the following student groups added to Milton Union sports. I'm speaking of the cheerleaders, marching band, pep band, the majorettes, drill team. Their hard work and dedication made for great performances. Let's go to football for the 1950s. It's so varied, I'm going to summarize. From the 50 to 59, there was 49 wins, 35 losses, and 6 ties. That's a winning percentage of somewhere around 58%. Milton were league champs in 1954, 59, and 60. Co-champs in 1952. Close your eyes a moment and live over this memory, or this historical moment of Milton's football with me. Imagine it's 1954, last game of the season at Randolph, which is now Northmont. Jim Ballou, the fullback, ran an 89-yard touchdown, but it was called back because Dick Overland had clipped on the play. So the very next play, after the penalty yard was assessed, Dick Overland ran 99 yards for a touchdown. 2 plays, 2 long runs. And it so happens that that 99-yard run still is a Milton record. And of course, it's a state record, national record, since from scrimmage, you know, that's the most you can run from scrimmage. So other outstanding players of the 1950s in football were Chuck Green. He is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame for his work at Wittenberg University. Ralph Hildebrand was an All-Ohio selection his senior year. Tom Gingrich went on to play at the Naval Academy. So football was a big deal in West Milton, as it is today. Basketball, from 1950 through 1959, they had 88 wins, 53 losses, for a percentage of around 62.5%. They were the Stillwater Valley champs in 50 and 51, and the SWBL champs in 1952, 54, and 55, and co-champs in the SWBL in 53 and 56. Add them up, folks. That's 7 straight years that we were either champs or co-champs in the first half of the 1950s. The balance, a few names should be mentioned. The Fox twins, Charlie and Bill, were very prominent. Phil Brimbaugh, Ken Hemrick. But let's look at it this way. all who played deserve to be mentioned because it takes a whole team to be great. The last part of the 50s, we were competitive, but we weren't as championship style as early 50s. Let's go to boys baseball in the 1949, 1950, up through even 1960. Catch it, because in the summing up that decade, they had 70 wins and 20 losses. They were Southwestern Buckeye League champs 6 years. They were co-champs 1 year. They were second in the league 2 years, and third place 1 year. That's a good record. I attribute a lot of that success to, we not only played school ball, but all summer long we would have what you call the Merchants League or American Legion, or a lot of summer baseball. And shouts out should go to Duke Small, Bill Holder, Chris Hansen, and some other of the gentlemen of the community that gave of their time in the summer to help perpetuate our success in baseball. The boys track, in 1951, Bill Fox set a school record in the 440-yard run at 50.5 seconds. In 1953, the Milton team was SWBL champs. In 1954, several records were set at that time. Ronnie Peel was a state champ in the 880 run that year. Bob Schule broke the Milton school record in the mile run of 4 minutes, 36.4 seconds. Dick Overla set the 120-yard low hurdle record at 14.2 seconds. Don Cummins set the school shot put record at 45 feet, 5.5 inches. In 1955, Dee France set the school record in the high jump at 5 foot 6 3/4 inch. Jim Ballou set a broad jump record of 21 feet 1 inch. Danny Hurley had the pole vault record at 11 foot 6 inches. Then Dee France, Larry Pickerton, Bob Schule, and Ronnie Peel set the school record in mile relay at 3 minutes, 35.5 seconds. 1956, Jack Randall set a discus record for the school of 137 feet and 4.5 inches. 1959, Al Dexter set a school record in the high jump, where he broke the record of the previous record by jumping 5 foot 11.5 inches. Next year, in 1960, Jesse Haynes broke his own school record in the 180-yard high hurdles, which was 16.3 seconds. He lowered it to 15.9 seconds. Al Dexter broke his own record in the high jump, jumping 6 foot 3/4 inch. Also, the cross country began in 1953 and continued in 54, then took a 4-year absence. Cross country at those days was just gaining prominence and interest. Also, the boys golf, first year for that night in Milton Union was 1955, and J.A. Williams, later to be a principal of the school, was the coach back then. But go to the girls' sports. All through the 50s, the girls mainly had GAA or the intramurals to look back on and have fun participating in. In 1953, however, they did have basketball, 4 games that year. They won 1 and lost 3. Softball that year, they had 1 game with Troy. Ended up Troy had 10, Milton had 4. 54, there was the 55. Now in 56, the girls had 18 girls go out on the reserve team and had 11 on the varsity. So there started to be an interest in the girls' basketball and also in the volleyball. They had 18 on the reserve team, 12 on the varsity. And it continued that way through the decade, and so that the girls' sports were just gaining prominence. But in 1959, listen to this, to GAA bowling. You may remember, we had 70 Lady Bulldogs who bowled in that GAA intramurals. And it was usually in the month of March. And at the end of the month, there was a trophy given for the highest score and also for the highest average. And most of that bowling was done at the West Milton Lanes. That pretty much sums up the sports at Milton. I would like to just let people remember that in the 1930s, Milton product Carl Grunwald played for the Chicago Bears. He in fact perfected the T-formation concept. A couple of Carl's teammates, you may remember, Bronco Nagurski and Red Grange. In the 1950s, Ron Peel set that Ohio State, or won the Ohio State 880-yard run. Bob Schule, a Milton graduate, went on to win the 5,000-meter run in the Tokyo Olympics. Chuck Green, as I mentioned, is an inductee into the College Football Hall of Fame. Even today, we have a Milton graduate playing, starting left guard, number 78 for the University of Indiana Hoosiers, Wes Martin. So Milton has had many people who distinguish themselves after school. But for all of this, Milton sports is something to be cherished by all. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Sharon Kaufman Hastings.
Hi, I'm Sharon Kaufman Hastings, and I'm going to speak today about being a teenager in the 50s. I grew up across the river on the east side of town, on Wheelock Road, and I was a typical teenager who experienced life in the 50s. In the mid-50s, we became enthralled with rock and roll. We had Pat Boone, Ricky Nelson, Fats Domino, Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and of course, Elvis Presley. Elvis was one of the most popular rock and roll musicians of the time. He started his career in 1954, and in 1956, his first hit, Heartbreak Hotel, was released and became an instant #1 hit. He was scandalous to the older generation with his sexy gyrations while singing. We no longer had to listen to music on the radio, as we could purchase a 45 RPM vinyl record, one of our favorite music, for less than $1. We had record players and listened to our favorite songs. We had a favorite disc jockey, Gene By Golly Berry, who played our favorite tunes on WING radio station out of Dayton, Ohio. Transistor radios became available, and you could carry your music with you if you had good batteries. Our family didn't get to go out to eat very often, but it was a treat to have a Sunday meal at the West Milton Inn, and you could get a good steak dinner for $3 per person. The inn had a wonderful salad bar and, of course, corn fritters. In the early 50s, we would get a sandwich at Her's Restaurant on Saturday evening after purchasing our weekly groceries at Brown's Market in downtown West Milton. Occasionally, we would go to see a movie at the Roxy Theater. I remember seeing Our Gang and Wizard of Oz there. We would buy our shoes at Petoskey's, later Yunt's, and since there were 4 females in my family, we would buy dresses at Ruth's Dress Shop or Maybell's. We got our haircut at Ludalby Beauty Shop. We bought our prescriptions and medicinal products at Kenny's Drugstore. as well as comics and magazines. Did you ever put peanuts in your bottle of Coke? It was so good. You could also buy a bottle of Coke or Pepsi from a refrigerated machine that kept the drink cold. The price was 5 cents a bottle. On weekends and summertime, you could play outside with friends all day long, and no one worried about you or what you were doing as long as you were home in time for supper. No one locked the doors on their houses or cars. I remember our first black and white TV, which was an 8-inch screen in a big box. It took 5 minutes for it to warm up. The Mickey Mouse Club was an after-school favorite. The guys were in love with Annette Funicello. We watched American Bandstand and learn new rock and roll dance moves. High school activities were football and basketball games on Friday nights. After the games, young folks would congregate at Cool's, Dairy Bar, or the Den. We also enjoyed pizza at Vic Casano and Mom Denise's Pizza Parlor down by Dayton. Teens often included a meal at Frisch's or Parkmore, which were drive-in restaurants with pull-up service. Your order was taken by a car hop who served your food on a metal tray attached to the car's front driver's side window, and you ate your food in the car. Since many cars did not have radios, the drive-in had music playing through the call box or over loudspeakers so customers could listen while they ate. Communication was much more difficult than today. Most homes only had one phone, and it was a party line, so no one could use it for extended periods. Phone numbers were 4 digits. Do you remember 2 longs and a short? Do you remember school lunches for 25 cents per day? I remember salmon patties, green peas, and applesauce on Friday. Johnny Marzetti was a favorite as well. Our moms used to cut chicken, chop eggs, and spread mayonnaise on the same cutting board with the same knife with no bleach, and we didn't become ill from food poisoning. My mom used to defrost hamburger on the counter. Our school sandwiches were wrapped in wax paper in a brown bag, not in ice pack coolers, and I don't remember getting E. coli. Most teenage guys would have rather gone swimming in the river instead of a pristine pool. They loved a skinny dip. We all took gym, not PE, and risked permanent injury with a pair of high-top Keds instead of having cross-training athletic shoes with air-cushioned soles and built-in light reflectors. I can't recall any injuries, but they must have happened because they tell us how much safer we are now. Flunking gym was not an option, even for stupid kids. I guess PE must have been harder than gym. Speaking of school, we all said prayers and sang the national anthem, and staying in detention after school caught all sorts of negative comments. I thought that I was supposed to accomplish something before I was allowed to be proud of myself. We didn't act up at the neighbor's house either, because if we did, we got our butts spanked then, and when we got home, we got spanked again. Do you remember when all the girls had ugly gym uniforms? Nobody owned a purebred dog. Your mom wore nylons that came in 2 pieces. Most of your male teachers wore neckties, and female teachers had their hair done and wore high heels. You got your windshield cleaned, your oil checked, your gas pumped without asking, all for free. Do you remember getting green stamps when you bought groceries and gas? Laundry detergent had free glasses, dishes, or towels hidden inside the box. Do you remember free prizes in the cereal box? Teachers threatened to keep kids back a grade if they failed, and they did. Being sent to the principal's office was nothing compared to being the fate that awaited you when you got home. Basically, we were in fear of our lives, but it wasn't because of what happened on the evening news. It was because our parents had a much bigger threat with the belt. Do you remember Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, Laurel and Hardy, Howdy Doody, and the Peanut Gallery, the Lone Ranger, the Shadow Nose, Roy and Dale Evans and their horses Trigger and Buttermilk? Did you have summer evenings filled with bike rides, baseball games, roller skating on the sidewalks, bowling, and visits to the swimming pool? Do you remember coffee shops with tableside jukebox, blackjack, clove, and tea-berry chewing gum, licorice sticks, Mary Janes, Necco wafers, Vita honeys, a hi-fi, metal ice cube trays with a lever, mimeograph machines with the smell of the printing on the paper, Beanie and Cecil, roller skate keys, Studebakers and Henry J's, wash tub ringers, the Fuller Brush Man, Omar Home Bakery Delivery, Tinker Toys, and Lincoln Logs. McDonald's hamburger for a quarter, baseball card packs for a nickel with bubble gum, a gallon of gas for a quarter. Some examples of 50s lingo are blast, Big Daddy, bread, cool it, cranked, cut out, dig it, pad, made in the shade, split, and on and on. I remember the West Milton Fall Festival, which was held on Washington Street. Tents were set up in the streets and various events including games, vendor displays, and food, and of course there were tons and tons of confetti. So much fun. Each year for the homecoming parade, each of the four high school grades would create their float. The float would be made with chicken wire attached to a bed of a farmer's wagon, and the wire would be filled with crepe paper to form a theme-based design. We created ours in the Jay's barn. Our class made a large whale, and the theme was, "We have a whale of a team." It was a lot of work and a lot of laughing and fun, and a prize was given for the best float, and I think we won that.
Did.
We loved our music, and the #1 hits for the 50s are as follows: "A White Christmas" by Bing Crosby in 1950, "Come On to My House" by Rosemary Clooney in 51, "Unforgettable" by Nat King Cole in 52, You by the Ames Brothers in 53, "That's Amore" by Dean Martin in 54, "Rock Around the Clock" by Bill Haley and the Comets in 55, "Heartbreak Hotel" by Elvis in 56, "Love Letters in the Sand" by Pat Boone in 57, "It's All in the Game" by Tommy Edwards in 58, and "Back the Night" by Bobby Darin in 59. In conclusion, I know there are many more wonderful memories I haven't covered and are remembered by my peers. I'm sure we are all glad we grew up in this time frame and had so many wonderful experiences. Hopefully our memories will be remembered for as long as we live. And I'd like to turn it over to Susie Miller Cummins.
Hi, I'm Susie Miller Cummins, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Miller's Grove Swimming Pool and Drive-In Theater. I'd first like to tell about the history of it. In 1927, my grandfather, J.P. Miller, dug out a pond by Mill Creek so that his family could clean up there and cool off after working in the family's coal business. Later, he decided that maybe a mud pond wasn't exactly the best place to clean up, so he eventually put a concrete bottom in it. A lot of the local kids then would come and swim in the summer to cool off, and so he thought maybe it would be a good idea to build a public pool. So that's what he did in 1931 and 1932. So that became Miller's Grove Swimming Pool. At that time, my grandfather was an elder in the Church of the Brethren, and several of the deacons and elders came to him and said they just didn't think it was appropriate for half-naked men and women to be swimming together, and perhaps he could put a wall down the middle of the pool to separate them. Well, of course, he said this wasn't feasible, and he said he needed to keep the pool open so that he would have a means of support for his family. Also at this time, he cleared out a number of trees on the property so that he could build shelter houses so that families could come and picnic in the shade and then go swimming. He also built bleachers at the west end of the swimming pool so that people that didn't want to swim could at least come and watch their family and friends swim. In 1938, my grandfather passed away, and my dad, Dale, and my Uncle Bill took over the operation of the pool. It was open from Memorial Day through Labor Day, and in 1951, they built a boardwalk around the pool and put 2 elevated sun decks so that people could sun. These are some of the pictures of the crowds during the 1950s. Sometimes it got so large that they had to hire an attendant to come and help with the parking because the parking lot would fill up. Because of the Christian background of the family, there was no alcohol allowed on the premises, and this was the rule through the 2004 when the swimming pool closed. Many of you probably remember taking swimming lessons at the pool in the 1950s, and Del Roniger was the swimming instructor, and I know everybody complained because the water was so cold. The location of the pool was on Frederick Road, and it was just a unique situation because there are 3 school districts right in that area. The Miami and Montgomery County line ran through the grove, so people to the south of that went to Vandalia Butler schools. On the west side of Frederick Road, they went to Milton Union schools, and on the east side, they went to Tippecanoe. And probably a mile or 2 to the west across the Stillwater River was Randolph Township. So all these kids would come to the pool, and you got to make and meet so many people and make friendships. I still see people and 60 years later that I met at the pool or at least worked at the pool with them. There was a playground at the pool. It was on gravel base, so you know, we didn't worry about having cushions for our kids. We got scraped up knees and elbows sometimes, but we survived. There was an arcade that had a punching bag that the boys could test their muscles and strength. There was a photo booth that printed out little pictures like this in metal frames. This one is 63 years old. It's a picture of my dad and me, and it's amazing the quality because 63 years later you can still see us. There was a metal stamping machine that you could, you know, if you wanted to profess your love for somebody, you would stamp out a disc like this. This one says, Susie Miller loves Joe Cummins. There were pinball machines and other arcade games also. The concession stand was located next to it. It had popcorn, potato chips, hot dogs, candy bars, ice cream bars. Didn't have the pizza and walking tacos and nachos and cheese like they have now, but I think everybody enjoyed the things, especially the frozen candy bars. Reese's Cups and Snickers and Milky Ways were always popular with the kids because they wouldn't melt in the heat. Some of the people from Milton that worked at the pool in the 50s were Bill and Devon Jay, John Lay, Gary Schmierman, Gene Waymeyer Fox, Dale Hughes, Tom Loudon, Bob Schul, Connie Rhodes Niles, Judy Loudon Swank, Nancy Oberman Ermy, Dave Whitman, Dave Beam, Marianne Yant, Huffaker, Bill Johnston, Barb Bennett, Barr, John Widener, Larry Bolander, Joanne Feathers Reeds, Cindy Crest Sherman, and Carol Garrison Kleinfelder. Of course, Stu and I were pretty much permanent fixtures there, even when we didn't want to be, but we managed to get along okay. Because of the location of the pool, there were probably as many kids from other schools that worked there as there were from West Milton. In 1949, my dad and Uncle Bill built the drive-in theater just south of the pool. This is an architect's drawing of it. There were parking spaces for about 450 cars. It was also neighborhood friendly because they had benches at the front of the theater and along each side of the concession stand so kids could walk in and view the movie. First it was open 7 days a week, but then with the popularity of TV and nighttime sports and the fact that you couldn't start the movie until it got dark enough, and a lot of people that worked couldn't stay out that late, so they ended up just having it open during the weekends. There was always a big fireworks display on the 4th of July at the rear of the theater, and one time we even had an Easter sunrise service that you could come in your PJs if you wanted to and sit in the car and listen to the sermon on your speaker. A large building was built behind the theater. It was called the Frederick Field House, and it held up to 1,000 people, and it was for large corporations or communities to have events. And I know the Milton schools always had their band camp there in the summer, and it was fun after marching and practicing on the field in the sun to get to go to the pool and cool off in the afternoon. Anyone who's on Facebook may have seen the group called Miller's Grove Was My Second Home. It has about 550 members, and it's now a closed group, but you can at least go on and see the memories that people have of it. There's a new group called Remembering Miller's Grove, and it's started by my cousin JP and Quantella Swank's grandson. And I know Nick would really enjoy it if you would join and maybe share some of your memories you have of the pool. Jerry Pearson lived in Frederick, just up the road from me, and he had a comment on Miller's Grove, my second home. I think his comment epitomizes what a lot of people felt about the pool and the memories they have. He quotes from a friend's timeline. I would never change life the way it is now, but sometimes I feel like I would like to take one day and go back to when I didn't have responsibilities, didn't have to work 40 or more hours a week, and didn't have to do grown-up things. I do it for just one day. Jerry said he thought about it, and this is what he would do. I'd ride my big balloon-tired bike down Frederick Road in the middle of July 1957, traveling leisurely and waving to all the people out in their yards or in their porches. I'd ride down the hill past Slim's gas station and into Miller's Grove. I'd sit high in the bleachers for a minute to scan the pool to see if any of my friends were swimming or on the sun deck. I'd knock on the office door and ask Dale if I could possibly swim without paying because I didn't have any money. He'd grunt, hand me a broom handle with a nail in the end and a burlap bag, and tell me to go pick up trash to earn my way. I'd swim for hours and hours, laugh and play in the sun for the remainder of the day. That would be my one day of carefree bliss. I know that the 50s was a great time in which to grow up, and I feel very fortunate to have been part of a family that apparently provided good memories and good times to a lot of people. Thank you. Now, Kay Baker, Kay Dittmer Baker is going to talk.
Hello, I'm Kay Dittmer Baker. I'm going to do cotillion. Now, I don't know about you, but I enjoyed cotillion because it was the only time I could be held by a different boy about every 5 minutes. Cotillion started in 1949. Instructors were Miss Cottrell and Mr. Kelly of the Arthur Murray Studios of Dayton. The cotillion operated from 8:30 to 11:30 for students from the 9th through the 12th grades. The lessons and formals were held in the school cafeteria. There was a dress code to adhere to. For the boys, nice slacks and sport shirts. Can't you just see that now? And the girls had to wear nylon stockings. No way. Flats and skirts, no slacks. In those days, we did have a dress code, and even to school, you could not wear pants, the girls. There were 2 formal dances every year. One in December, which was the Christmas formal. This is a picture of the Christmas formal in 1954. And in the spring, of course, was a spring formal. 1952, the dance instructor was John Lang, and he was also the dance instructor in 1953. In December of 1953, square dancing was introduced to the school students in grades 7 through 12. That was the most fun. The first lesson was held in the high school cafeteria on January 9th, 1954. Mrs. Treva O'Neill of Trotwood was the instructor and caller, and I guess she was pretty famous in the Dayton area as a caller. Registration for cotillion took place September 22nd, 1956. That year, the instructors were Bob and Ruth Tinnerman. I think we have someone among us who knows them pretty well. 1959 to 1960, the dance instructor was from the Fred Astaire Studios. And this ends the 1950 era of dance. However, some of the more popular songs that they played at cotillion through the years was 50, Goodnight Irene, 51, Tango, 52, Bunny Hop, 53, Stranger in Paradise, 54, Earth Angel, 55, Cherry Pink and Apple Blossom White, 56, Blue Suede Shoes, 57, a White Sport Coat, 58, All I Have to Do is Dream, 59, A Teenager in Love. Now I'll turn it over to Russ Hyman.
I am Russ Hyman. A little bit here on Overlook Park and the skating rink and how it was in the 50s. It was 15 acres that was purchased the north end of West Mountain by the Dayton to Piqua traction line, and built a park there, and this was in 1903, and was made into a dance hall when they built the building there, and they had boats that they rented for fishing and that picnic area all over down over the hill. This went on until 1935, and then in 35 it was purchased then by Art Homes, the 15 acres, for $500, and they still used the dance hall until World War II, and then Art leased it to a man, Fred Schick from Troy, and he put in a new hardwood floor in the building and turned it into a skating rink, which ran from 1941 to 1956. But in the 50s, during that time, what I remember about the rink is that it was the best place to have a great time. The rink was managed by Virgil and Florence Pierce and their son Kenny. You would buy your skates or rent your skates, and Kenny would fit you and get you set up. Of course, Florence, you would buy your ticket from her, and then she would sell refreshments and that at her end of the rink. And of course, Virgil, he kept the old coal furnace fired, kept the place warm. And when you would go in, all they had was old wooden benches, and you'd change your shoes and put them under the bench and hang your coat on the wall on an old hook. The place was very dimly lit. Must have just had maybe a dozen, like 60 or 70 watt light bulbs. Didn't have fluorescent lighting, but the place was always warm. Remember, in the summer it'd be so hot they would have to open the windows, and no air conditioning or anything. And then the dances, they'd have like all skate, and they'd have all girls skate and all boys, and then they'd have freestyle. Then they would have the boogie bounce and waltzes, and if you had to go to the restroom or whatever, they didn't have bathrooms or no watering fountains or like that. You had to go outside to the outhouse, which it only had like a 60 watt light bulb, if it worked.